Welcome back to another episode of the Peak Performance Podcast. I'm Brad Young, and today we're diving deep into two of the most exciting and practical frontiers in athletic training and human optimization. No guests, no interruptions, just you, me, and a conversation that could genuinely change the way you train, recover, and perform for the rest of your life. In this episode, we're covering two topics that belong together: the rise of AI driven predictive coaching what some are calling your new digital coach, and the proactive science of prehab and injury prevention. These aren't trends for elite Olympic athletes or professional sports franchises with $1 million budgets. These are tools and strategies that ordinary motivated people, weekend warriors, amateur endurance athletes, gym regulars, and anyone serious about their body can start using right now. Think of this episode like a chapter in a book. We're going to build on each idea, layer by layer, until you walk away with a complete picture and a practical plan you can implement this week. Settle in. Let's get into it. Why these two topics and why now? For decades, the difference between good athletes and great athletes came down to access. Access to great coaches, access to sports science labs, access to recovery technology, and personalized nutrition planning. The average person training 3 or 4 days a week simply didn't have those resources. You made your best guess, followed a generic program you found online, and hoped you wouldn't break down before you saw results. That era is ending. Quietly and quickly, a new kind of intelligence has entered the training world. One that lives in your wristband, your phone, your earbuds, and a growing array of wearable sensors. Artificial intelligence platforms are now capable of analyzing thousands of data points from your body every single day and turning them into specific, actionable recommendations. Not general recommendations. Your recommendations based on your biology, your schedule, your sleep, and your stress. At the same time, sports medicine researchers have spent the last 15 years developing something equally powerful: the understanding that most training injuries don't just happen. They build, they accumulate, they leave warning signs in your body days and sometimes weeks before you feel the first twinge of pain. The science of catching those warning signs and acting on them before they become injuries is what we call pre-hab. And when you combine pre-hab with AI-driven coaching, you get something genuinely extraordinary. A system that helps you push harder on the days your body is ready and pulls you back on the days it isn't. That combination is the subject of today's entire episode. And by the time we're done, you'll understand not just the science behind it, but exactly how to build it into your own routine. Starting today. Topic 1: AI-driven predictive coaching. The digital coach. Let's start with a simple question. What does a great coach actually do? If you've ever had one, a real one, you know that the best coaches aren't just program designers. They're observers. They watch you warm up and notice that you're moving differently. They ask how you slept and actually factor that into what happens in the next 60 minutes. They know when to push you past your comfort zone and when to back off, even when you think you can handle more. That attentiveness, that constant calibration is what separates a transformative coaching relationship from a generic workout plan. Now, imagine having that level of attentiveness running 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, without ever needing a break or missing a detail. That's the promise of AI-driven predictive coaching. And it's no longer a promise. It's a reality that millions of people are beginning to experience right now, from tracking the past to predicting the future. Here's the distinction that matters most when we talk about AI and training: the difference between tracking and predicting. For years, wearable devices did a solid job of tracking, counting your steps, logging your heart rate during a workout, estimating how many calories you burned. That information is useful, but it's historical. It tells you what already happened. It doesn't tell you what to do next. The new generation of AI coaching platforms has fundamentally changed that equation. By continuously analyzing patterns across multiple streams of data: your resting heart rate, your heart rate variability, your sleep duration and quality, your training load over the past several weeks, your stress levels, and even your daily schedule. These systems can build a predictive model of your readiness. They're not just looking at today. They're looking at the trend lines, the subtle shifts, the early signals that your body is moving toward a state of fatigue or a state of peak readiness. A landmark review published in the Journal of Strength and Conditioning Research found that heart rate variability, the slight variation in time between each heartbeat, is one of the most reliable indicators of an athlete's current physiological stress and recovery status. When that variability is high, your nervous system is recovered and your body is primed to handle intensity. When it drops significantly below your personal baseline, your system is under stress, and pushing hard is likely to produce diminishing returns and increase injury risk. The AI platforms we're talking about today monitor this metric continuously and use it as one of the primary inputs for daily training recommendations. What these platforms actually do: real time load management. AI platforms monitor your accumulated training strain and cross reference it with your recovery metrics. If your score drops below a threshold, the system flags the session for modification, swapping a hard interval run for a recovery walk or mobility session automatically. Sleep and recovery analysis. Advanced platforms like Whoop and Aura analyze not just sleep duration, but sleep architecture, the ratio of deep sleep, REM sleep, and light sleep you're getting each night. This data feeds directly into readiness scores that determine training recommendations for the following day. Adaptive schedule intelligence. Some platforms now integrate with your calendar and your personal baseline data to predict fatigue windows days in advance, helping you schedule your hardest sessions around periods of likely high readiness and protecting your recovery windows automatically. The science behind the signal. Let's talk about the research, because this is where it gets genuinely exciting, and where the credibility of these tools is firmly established. A study published in the International Journal of Sports Physiology and Performance followed a group of competitive cyclists over an extended training block, comparing two groups: one that trained according to a fixed program and one that used heart rate variability guided training decisions to adjust intensity day by day. The group that responded to their daily readiness data significantly outperformed the fixed program group in time trial performance and reported fewer symptoms of overtraining and fatigue along the way. What does that mean in plain language? It means that training smarter, not just training harder, produces better results. The people who listened to their body's signals as interpreted by the data got stronger and faster than the people who blindly followed a schedule regardless of how they felt. This is the core logic of AI driven predictive coaching. Stop guessing, start responding. Another important piece of research published in the European Journal of Sports Science examined how machine learning algorithms could predict an athlete's future performance and injury risk based on patterns in their training load and recovery data. The researchers found that AI models were able to identify periods of elevated injury risk up to 2 weeks before any subjective symptoms appeared. 2 weeks. That's an extraordinary window of opportunity. And it's one that AI coaching platforms are now beginning to deliver to everyday users, not just elite athletes, in research labs. The technology works because the human body is consistent in the way it signals stress. Whether you're an Olympic sprinter or a 38-year-old parent who runs 5-kilometer races on Saturday mornings, your physiology follows the same fundamental patterns. The AI doesn't care about your athletic pedigree. It cares about your data, and your data tells the truth, even when your motivation is telling you to push through. Real products, real results. Let's get specific, because one of my pet peeves with wellness content is when people talk about technology in vague, abstract terms without ever grounding it in actual products that real people can pick up and use. So here are 3 platforms that are leading the field right now, each with a different approach, a different price point, and a different strength. Whoop is perhaps the most talked about AI coaching platform in serious training circles. It's a subscription-based wearable that never stops monitoring your heart rate variability, respiratory rate, skin temperature, and sleep. Every morning, it gives you a recovery score, a number between 0 and 100 that reflects how prepared your nervous system is to handle strain. It then gives you a recommended strain ceiling for the day. If you exceed it consistently without adequate recovery, it flags you for overreaching. Whoop users in a published pilot study reported measurably improved sleep habits and training consistency after 90 days of use, simply because the daily feedback made the connection between recovery and performance impossible to ignore. Garmin's body battery and training status features take a similar approach, but within a broader ecosystem of GPS enabled devices. Garmin's algorithm combines heart rate variability, activity, and stress data into a body battery metric, a simple gauge that tells you how much physiological energy reserve you currently have. When your body battery is low and your training status shifts from productive to strained or deload, the device is telling you something important. Your system needs input before it can produce output. Independent testing by coaches working with masters athletes found that Garmin's training status classification accurately predicted periods of poor performance and elevated perceived effort more than 70% of the time. Oura Ring approaches the problem from the sleep side first, recognizing that recovery happens during rest. Its AI-driven readiness score has been validated in several peer-reviewed studies, including research published in Frontiers in Physiology that confirmed Aura's sleep stage detection was comparable to laboratory-grade polysomnography for measuring time in deep and REM sleep. Elite sports organizations, including several National Basketball Association teams, have incorporated Oura Ring data into their daily athlete management protocols. Implementation play, your AI coaching routine. Action plan. Here's exactly how an average person, someone with a job, a family, and maybe 10 to 12 hours a week to dedicate to training, can begin using AI driven predictive coaching to train more effectively starting this week. Choose your platform. Start with one wearable that measures heart rate variability and sleep. Whoop is excellent if you want detailed daily coaching feedback and you're willing to invest in a subscription. Garmin is ideal if you're already using a GPS watch for running or cycling. Oura is best if you want a discrete device and prioritize sleep analysis. You don't need all three. Pick one and commit to it for at least 60 days. Establish your baseline. Spend the first 2 to 3 weeks wearing your device consistently without changing anything about your training. This is critical. The AI needs to learn your personal norms before it can give you meaningful predictions. Your baseline heart rate variability is completely individual. What's normal for you might be very different from the population average, and the system needs your data to calibrate correctly. Commit to one rule. Once your baseline is established, give yourself one non-negotiable rule. If your recovery score falls below 60%, or whatever threshold your platform recommends, you will not do a planned hard session that day. You will substitute it with either a full rest day, a light mobility session, or a gentle walk. This is the hardest part for motivated people, but it is the most important part. Review weekly trends. Every Sunday, spend 10 minutes reviewing your weekly data. Look at the trend in your recovery scores, your sleep consistency, and your training load. Are your hardest training days consistently followed by very low recovery scores the next morning? That's a sign your loading and recovery balance is off. Are your recovery scores consistently high? You may have room to add intensity. Let the data guide your planning for the following week. Pair data with journaling. Keep a simple training journal alongside your wearable data. Each day, note your subjective energy level, mood, and motivation on a scale of 1 to 10. Over time, you'll begin to see the correlation between your subjective feelings and your objective data, and you'll develop a much deeper and more nuanced understanding of your own body than any device alone can provide. Topic 2, pre-hab and proactive injury prevention. Stop injuries before they start. Now let's move into the second major topic of today's episode, one that is, if anything, even more immediately relevant to the average active adult than AI coaching platforms. Because here's the painful truth that most people who train seriously eventually face. Injuries don't just happen. They build, they accumulate, and the body almost always sends warning signals before the breakdown occurs. Signals that most of us are trained to ignore, push through, or misread entirely. Prehab is the practice of catching those warning signals before they become injuries. The term itself is a play on rehabilitation. Rehab is what you do after you get hurt, while prehab is what you do to make sure you don't get hurt in the first place. But this isn't just about foam rolling and doing a few band exercises before your workout, though those things have value. Real science based prehab is a systematic approach to monitoring your body's stress signals, managing your training load intelligently, and building the structural resilience in tendons, connective tissue, and stabilizing muscles that protects you when your primary movers get taxed. Understanding overtraining syndrome. To understand why prehab matters so much, we need to spend a moment on one of the most misunderstood and underdiagnosed conditions in recreational sports: overtraining syndrome. This is not just feeling tired after a hard week. Overtraining syndrome is a clinical condition recognized and studied by sports medicine researchers for decades that occurs when the cumulative stress of training consistently exceeds the body's capacity to recover and adapt. A comprehensive review published in the British Journal of Sports Medicine defined overtraining syndrome as a neuroendocrine disorder, meaning that the damage happens not just in your muscles, but in your hormonal and nervous systems. Chronically overtrained athletes show measurably elevated levels of cortisol, the primary stress hormone, along with suppressed testosterone, reduced immune function, disrupted sleep architecture, and significantly elevated resting heart rates. Left unchecked, overtraining syndrome can sideline an athlete for months, and in severe cases requires complete rest for 6 months to a year before full recovery occurs. Here's what makes this relevant to every single person listening right now. Overtraining syndrome is not just a problem for people training 20 or 30 hours per week. Research published in the Journal of Athletic Training found that recreational athletes training as few as 8 hours per week were susceptible to overtraining syndrome when their training load escalated too quickly without corresponding recovery. The two most reliable early warning signs consistently identified across multiple studies were a sustained elevation in resting heart rate of more than 7 beats per minute above personal baseline, and an unexplained increase in perceived effort during workouts that previously felt manageable. Those are measurable, trackable signals. And the beautiful thing about the world we live in today is that we now have the tools to track them continuously, not just when we feel bad enough to pay attention. The warning signs: your body is sending elevated resting heart rate. A resting heart rate that stays more than 7 beats per minute above your personal average for 3 or more consecutive days is one of the most well-established early indicators of accumulated physiological stress. Research by Plews and colleagues published in the International Journal of Sports Physiology and Performance confirmed this threshold as a reliable trigger point for training modification. Declining heart rate. Variability. A sustained downward trend in your heart rate variability over 5 to 7 days. Not just a single low reading, but a consistent directional change. Signals that your autonomic nervous system is under significant stress and adaptation is being compromised. This is the nervous system equivalent of a check engine light. Increased perceived effort. When a workout that felt like a 6 out of 10 last week feels like an 8 out of 10 this week with no change in the actual demands of the session, your body's telling you something has changed internally. Research from the Norwegian Olympic Federation showed that subjective perceived exertion, when tracked consistently, correlates strongly with objective markers of accumulated fatigue. Sleep disruption and mood changes. Difficulty falling asleep, increased irritability, reduced motivation, and a general sense of mental heaviness are consistently documented in the earliest stages of overtraining syndrome, often appearing days or weeks before any physical performance decline is measurable. A study in sports medicine noted that mood disturbance is frequently the first objective sign that clinical overtraining has begun. Persistent muscle soreness. Delayed onset muscle soreness that lasts longer than 72 hours and doesn't resolve between sessions, especially when it wasn't caused by a particularly novel or intense stimulus, is a reliable sign that recovery is falling behind accumulation. Your muscles are asking for a day off that they haven't been getting. What the research actually says about prevention. The science of injury prevention has advanced dramatically over the past decade, and the most important insight to emerge is one that challenges a deeply held belief in training culture: the idea that if you're not feeling pain, you're fine. Study after study has dismantled this assumption. A pivotal investigation published in the American Journal of Sports Medicine tracked over 300 recreational runners over a full year and found that the majority of running related injuries were preceded by measurable changes in training load metrics, specifically rapid increases in weekly mileage that outpaced the athlete's adaptation rate, an average of 4 to 6 weeks before the injury actually occurred. 4 to 6 weeks. Think about what that means. The injury that ruins your race season in May was being written into your body in March or early April. If someone had been watching the right signals at the right time, the injury might never have happened at all. This concept has been formalized in what sports scientists call the acute to chronic workload ratio, a framework that compares your training load over the past week to your average training load over the past 4 weeks. Research by Tim Gabbett, one of the world's leading sports science researchers and a contributor to the British Journal of Sports Medicine, established that athletes whose acute weekly load exceeds their chronic average by more than 30% face a dramatically elevated risk of non contact injury. In plain terms, if you've been training at a certain level for a month and then suddenly spike your effort in a single week, you're asking your connective tissue to absorb a demand it hasn't been prepared for, and something usually breaks. The good news, the genuinely great news, is that this ratio is completely calculable, completely trackable, and completely manageable once you understand it. You don't need a laboratory, you need consistency and attention. The physical side of prehab: building resilient bodies. Monitoring your metrics is only half of the prehab equation. The other half is physical: building the structural strength and flexibility that makes your body resistant to the forces that typically cause injury. Most training programs are designed around performance, getting stronger, running faster, lifting heavier. They are almost never designed around durability, making tendons more robust, strengthening the stabilizing muscles that protect joints under load, and building the neuromuscular coordination that keeps movement patterns clean when fatigue sets in. Research published in the British Journal of Sports Medicine examined the effect of targeted strength training for the hip and gluteal muscles on knee injury rates in recreational runners. The group that added 2 sessions per week of targeted hip strengthening exercises reduced their knee injury rate by more than 50% over a 12-month period compared to the control group that ran the same mileage without the supplementary work. 50%. That is a staggering reduction achieved with 2 30-minute sessions per week of simple equipment-free exercises. A similar landmark study published in the Scandinavian Journal of Medicine and Science and Sports followed soccer players who incorporated a structured prehab warm-up program focused on hip stability, balance, and eccentric hamstring strength. The intervention group experienced a 45% reduction in hamstring injuries and a 30% reduction in ankle sprains compared to the control group over a competitive season. These weren't exotic interventions. They were structured, intentional, movement quality focused routines performed consistently before each training session. The pattern across the research is consistent and clear. Athletes who invest time in deliberate structural preparation, shoulder made the key, not just warming up to perform, but training to protect, Honda Q, get injured significantly less often. And when they do get injured, the severity is usually lower and the recovery time is faster because the surrounding tissue is more resilient. The connection between AI coaching and prehab. Here's where today's two topics converge into something truly powerful. On their own, AI driven coaching and prehab are both valuable. Together, They form a self reinforcing system that is arguably the most effective approach to sustainable long term athletic performance available to the average person today. Cool. Without a coach, without a sports science staff, and without a professional training facility. The AI coaching platform tells you every day whether your body is in a state of readiness or a state of accumulated stress. It detects the early signals, the rising resting heart rate, the declining heart rate variability, the disrupted sleep, and translates them into a daily recommendation. When those signals are present, the pre-hab framework tells you exactly what to do instead of your planned hard session, targeted mobility work, stability training, gentle tissue preparation. You're not just resting passively. You're investing that energy into the structural resilience work that your standard training program almost certainly neglects. Think of it this way. The AI coaching system is your early warning radar, and the pre-hab practice is your contingency response. Most athletes have neither. They train on a fixed schedule, ignore the warning signals, push through accumulating fatigue, and eventually break down. With this integrated system, you have a dynamic, responsive approach to training that adapts to your body's actual state in real time every single day. Implementation play, your prehab protocol. Action plan. Let's make this concrete. Here's a practical, step-by-step prehab protocol that any active adult can implement immediately, regardless of your sport, your fitness level, or your current training schedule. And this is designed to take no more than 20 to 30 minutes per training session and requires no special equipment beyond what you likely already own. Track your resting heart rate every morning. Before you get out of bed, take 60 seconds to measure your resting heart rate. You can do this manually by counting your pulse for 30 seconds and doubling it, or by using any wearable device. Log this number every single day. After 2 weeks, calculate your personal average. From that point forward, if your resting heart rate is more than 7 beats above your average for 3 or more consecutive mornings, treat that as an automatic trigger to reduce training intensity and prioritize recovery for the next 48 hours. This one habit alone could prevent a significant proportion of overuse injuries that sideline recreational athletes every year. Build a 15-minute prehab warm-up before every training session, not just the hard ones. Spend 15 minutes on targeted structural preparation. A research-supported routine includes 5 minutes of hip and glute activation using body weight bridges, clamshells, and sideline leg raises. 5 minutes of ankle and knee stability work using single leg balance progressions. And 5 minutes of thoracic spine mobility using cat-cow movements, thread the needle rotations, and controlled extension over a foam roller. This isn't optional warm-up fluff. It is targeted training for the tissues that are most commonly involved in overuse injuries. Manage your week-over-week load increase. Never increase your total weekly training load, whether measured in mileage, total time, or total weight lifted, by more than 10% in a single week. This is the most universally supported training principle in sports medicine research, and it is the most universally violated one among motivated recreational athletes. Write down your weekly training totals before you plan next week. Calculate 10% of your current total. That is your maximum increase. Protect this boundary as if your training life depends on it, because in a very real sense, it does. Schedule one non-negotiable recovery day. Choose one day per week that is permanently designated as a recovery or prehab day. On this day, there is no running, no lifting, no high-intensity anything. Instead, you do 30 minutes of targeted mobility work, a gentle walk, swimming, or a restorative yoga session. This is not a weak choice. This is a strategic investment. Research consistently shows that athletes who include at least one structured recovery day per week maintain significantly higher performance levels over long training blocks than those who train every day without structured rest. Add eccentric strengthening for your most vulnerable tissues. Eccentric exercises, movements where the muscle is lengthened under load, like slowly lowering yourself through the descent phase of a squat or a calf raise, are among the most powerful tools in the prehab toolkit. Research from the British Journal of Sports Medicine showed that Eccentric heel drops performed twice per week reduced the incidence of Achilles tendon problems in runners by more than 40%. For athletes with a history of hamstring issues, Nordic hamstring curls and a body weight eccentric exercise have been shown in multiple studies to reduce hamstring strain rates by over 50%. 2 sessions per week, 15 minutes each. Extraordinary protection. Putting it all together, the peak performance system. Let's zoom out for a moment and look at the complete picture. Because what we've really been building across this entire episode is not just a collection of tips and tactics, it's a philosophy, a way of thinking about athletic performance that treats the body not as a machine to be driven as hard as possible, but as an adaptive biological system that thrives when it receives the right stimulus at the right time, followed by adequate opportunity to absorb and grow from that stimulus. The AI coaching platform is your daily readiness intelligence. Every morning, it tells you the truth about where your body is. It removes the guesswork and the wishful thinking that lead motivated people to train hard on the days when they should rest, and to rest on days when they actually have the capacity to do something extraordinary. Over months and years, that daily calibration compounds into performance gains that simply aren't achievable through rigid, schedule driven training alone. The pre-hab framework is your structural insurance policy. By systematically building the resilience of your tendons, stabilizing muscles and connective tissue, and by monitoring the physiological warning signals that predict injury risk, you dramatically reduce the probability that a breakdown will interrupt your training continuity. And training continuity, researchers agree, is the single most important variable in long-term athletic development, not the quality of any single workout, not the sophistication of your programming. Consistency over time without significant interruption. Together, these two systems give you something that used to be reserved for the most elite athletes in the world, a data-informed, physiologically responsive training practice that maximizes both performance and longevity. That combination is available to you today, right now, with tools that cost less than a pair of quality running shoes. What average looks like versus what peak looks like. The average approach. Train on a fixed schedule regardless of how you feel. Push through fatigue because hard work beats talent. Skip warm-up to save time. Add mileage or wait aggressively when motivation is high. Ignore elevated resting heart rate and mood disruption. Get injured. Rest involuntarily. Repeat the cycle every 12 to 18 months. The peak performance approach. Check your readiness score every morning and plan your day accordingly. Train hard when your body's ready. Substitute recovery work when warning signals appear. Build structural resilience into every session with a targeted prehab routine. Manage load increases deliberately. Stay healthy. Compound your gains year after year without interruption. The difference between these two approaches is not talent. It is not genetics. It is not access to elite coaching or expensive facilities. It is a set of habits, a set of tools, and above all, a mindset. One that treats recovery as performance, that treats data as a conversation with your body, and that treats injury prevention as the most important investment you can make in your athletic future. You don't have to be an elite athlete to train like one. You just have to be willing to pay attention. The long game. Why this changes everything. I want to close this episode by talking about something that doesn't get discussed enough in performance content: the long game. We live in a culture obsessed with the short term, the 10-week transformation, the race day peak, the single season of gains. And while those things are worth pursuing, the athletes who achieve the most remarkable outcomes over a lifetime of training are the ones who think in years and decades, not weeks and months. Research published in the journal Aging and Physical Activity followed masters athletes, competitive athletes in their 40s, 50s, 60s, and beyond over a 20-year period. The study found that the single strongest predictor of sustained high performance into later life was not genetic endowment, not training volume, and not coaching quality. It was the ability to avoid significant injuries that disrupted training continuity. Athletes who stayed healthy trained more consistently. Athletes who trained more consistently developed more deeply. Development compounded. By their late 50s, athletes who had managed their training intelligently were outperforming peers who had trained harder but less wisely in their younger years. That is what prehab and intelligent load management give you, not just this season's performance, but next decade's performance. The AI coaching platform that saves you from a reckless, hard session today might be the thing that keeps you competing at 55. The 15-minute prehab routine that feels like extra work on a Tuesday morning might be the thing that keeps your Achilles tendon intact through a full training block, and puts you on the start line of a race that a version of you without that routine would never have reached. Peak performance is not a destination you arrive at and park. It is a practice, daily, patient, consistent, and increasingly informed by the extraordinary tools that science and technology have placed in our hands. Use them. Your future self, training hard and healthy a decade from now, will thank you. Episode recap and key takeaways. Episode 96 summary. AI coaching is here now. Platforms like Whoop, Garmin, and Ring use heart rate variability, sleep data, and training load to predict your readiness daily, not just track what already happened. Your data tells the truth. Heart rate variability. Guided training has been shown in peer-reviewed research to outperform fixed training schedules in performance gains and reduction of overtraining symptoms. Injuries are predictable. AI models can detect elevated injury risk up to 2 weeks before symptoms appear. Resting heart rate, perceived effort, and mood disturbance are the earliest and most reliable warning signals. Prehab works dramatically. Targeted hip and glute strengthening reduces knee injuries by over 50%. Eccentric calf work cuts Achilles problems by 40%. Nordic hamstring curls reduce hamstring tears by over 50%. 2 sessions per week. The 10% rule is sacred. Never increase your weekly training load by more than 10% in a single week. Violating this single principle is responsible for a majority of overuse injuries in recreational athletes. Consistency is the real edge. Long-term performance is built on training continuity. The athlete who stays healthy and trains consistently for 5 years will outperform the athlete who trains harder but gets injured repeatedly. Every single time. Your challenge this week. Every episode of the Peak Performance Podcast ends the same way, with a challenge. Not a concept, not an idea, not something to think about. An action, something you do this week that moves you from the average column into the peak column. Here's your challenge for episode 96. Day 1, measure and record. Tomorrow morning, before your feet hit the floor, measure your resting heart rate for 60 seconds and write it down. Do this every morning this week. That's your baseline collection period beginning now. Day 2, research your wearable. Spend 30 minutes researching Whoop, Garmin Body Battery, or Oura Ring. Read 3 real user reviews from people with a similar training profile to yours. Make a decision about which platform makes the most sense for you to try. Day 3, build your prehab warm-up. Write out a 15-minute prehab routine using the framework from today's episode. 5 minutes of hip and glute activation, 5 minutes of ankle and knee stability, 5 minutes of thoracic mobility. Do it before your next training session. Evaluate how your body feels during and after compared to your normal warm-up. Day 4, calculate your load. Add up your total training time or mileage from last week, multiplied by 1.1. That number is your maximum allowable training load for next week. Write it on a sticky note and put it somewhere you'll see it when you're planning workouts. Day 5, protect your recovery day. Designate one day in the coming week as your non-negotiable recovery day. Put it in your calendar like a meeting you cannot cancel. Plan what you'll do: a walk, a gentle swim, a mobility session, so that when the day comes, you don't fill it with something hard out of habit or guilt. That's your week. 5 small shifts that practice consistently over the next 6 months will change the trajectory of your athletic life in ways you can't yet fully imagine. I believe in your capacity to do this work. Now go prove me right. This is Brad Young. I'll see you next episode.